My name is Olivia Harper. I'm 35, and this Christmas I walked into my sister's beautifully decorated home with my husband, Malik, gentle, brilliant, and black, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. Instead, the moment we stepped into the dining room, her 13-year-old son Noah looked straight at us, lifted his chin, and declared loudly, "We don't sit with your kind." The whole table burst into that strange mix of laughter, half awkward, half amused, as if cruelty was a holiday joke. Lauren giggled. My parents smiled, the kind of smile that says, "Kids will be kids," and not a single adult corrected him. I glanced around and finally saw what they had planned. Malik and I were assigned to a flimsy folding table shoved near the trash bin, with paper plates and plastic cups, while the core family, their words, not mine, sat proudly at the long mahogany table glowing under chandelier light. And in that moment, a truth settled in my chest like ice. They had no idea the entire house they were celebrating in and most of the roofs they slept under were owned quietly, legally, entirely by me. That night, I decided Christmas would be the last time my money paid for people who hated my kind. If you were in my place, what would you have done? And before we go deeper into this story, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? I remember standing beside that folding table on Christmas night, Malik's hand slipping quietly around mine, and feeling a familiar sting rising from somewhere old, somewhere shaped long before I ever learned to sign a mortgage or negotiate a trust. Because the truth is, that moment with Noah, it wasn't new. It was simply the grown-up version of the life I had been raised in. Growing up, Christmas in our house was the biggest performance of the year. Lauren, my older sister, the golden one, the one who always fit perfectly into my parents' unspoken template of our kind of people, woke up to mountains of gifts wrapping around the tree. New bicycles with glittering handlebars, a pink luggage set for her first solo girls trip with Mom, even ski lessons one year because she should know how to navigate cultured hobbies. Meanwhile, my pile of gifts could fit into a single grocery bag. Mom would hand me a stack of secondhand books with cracked spines, a sweater with the clearance tag still attached, and say something like, "You've never been the festive type anyway, sweetie. You're more low maintenance, independent." It was said with a smile that was meant to sound loving, but somehow it always felt like a gentle push into a smaller box. Lauren glowed under the attention, basking in every compliment about how tall she'd gotten, how pretty she was, how gracefully she walked into a room. And every year, without fail, Mom would make her little speech at the table about being grateful for our kind of people, a phrase that floated around the house like a Christmas ornament no one acknowledged but everyone understood. It meant respectable, white, educated, middle class in the proper sense, the kind who hosted book clubs and PTA meetings and talked about neighborhoods with good demographics. I didn't have the language for it at the time, but I felt the weight of it, like a quiet rule written into the walls. The first time I tried to bring someone outside that mold into our home, I was 10. My best friend then was Marisol, a bright, funny girl whose family had moved from Mexico. I adored her. She made me laugh, taught me to braid friendship bracelets, helped me with math, and never once treated me like Lauren did, as if I needed permission to exist. So one December afternoon, after school, I asked Mom if Marisol could come over to help decorate gingerbread. Mom hesitated. That was my first warning. When Marisol stepped into our foyer, her small backpack slung over her shoulder, eyes wide at our oversized Christmas tree, Mom smiled politely but stiffly. She offered a plate of cookies but didn't sit down with us. And when Marisol went to wash her hands in the kitchen, Mom leaned down beside me and whispered, "Don't bring too many of them into our home, honey. It can make people uncomfortable." Them. As if my friend was a threat to the wallpaper. As if her presence diluted something fragile and valuable about our family. I didn't fully understand discrimination then, but I understood humiliation. I remember the way my cheeks burned, how I suddenly wished the gingerbread house would collapse so I had something else to focus on. I remember avoiding Marisol's eyes, praying she didn't hear what Mom had said. But she did. She always did. Kids hear everything. She never came over again. At 10 years old, I learned that my mother's version of hospitality had borders quiet, polite borders wrapped in soft smiles and careful words. Polite, distinction. Discrimination dressed as etiquette. And it wasn't just about Marisol. Year after year, the pattern continued. Any friend of mine who didn't match the family's preferred aesthetic, too brown, too foreign, too working class, would receive that same strained politeness. Lauren's friends, meanwhile, were welcomed with open arms, invited to stay for dinner, praised for their manners. Even when they were loud, even when they were entitled, even when one girl accidentally knocked over a lamp and whispered, "Your house smells old," Mom insisted on calling the girl such a delightful young lady. By middle school, I'd learned not to bring anyone home unless they were the kind of kid who made Mom relax her shoulders the moment she saw them. I started studying more, hiding in my room after dinner, finding comfort in numbers and logic because numbers didn't judge. Equations didn't whisper about our kind. By the time I turned 15, I could already feel myself drifting out of orbit from the rest of the family. I was the strange one who didn't fit. The one who wasn't pretty like Lauren, who wasn't sociable like Lauren, who didn't look right under the family lens. Even though we shared the same blood, I was treated like the kid who belonged to some other category, one they couldn't quite place but knew wasn't fully theirs. And every Christmas, the message returned in some form. Lauren got trips, gadgets, stylish clothes. I got practical things. Lauren got praised for her charisma. I got told to be grateful and not make a fuss. Lauren fit perfectly into the mold of who they believed the Harper family should be. And me? I was always gently nudged out of the frame, as if I didn't quite match the picture. The older I grew, the more I understood that my family admired only one version of womanhood, the soft, social, presentable kind. Lauren fit it perfectly. She glided through school, joined cheerleading, dated boys with lake houses, studied communications because it looks good on paper, and posted sunlit resort photos that made my mother beam with pride. I wasn't like that. I found comfort in data, in patterns, in things that didn't rely on being likable or looking the part. By the time I was choosing a major, I knew exactly what I wanted. Finance, analytics, something that felt rooted in logic rather than approval. My father frowned in disappointment when I declared it. "Honey, you're too emotional for numbers." "And it's not. Feminine, why not something lighter?" he said, as if my future should be chosen based on aesthetics. At family gatherings, the joke became routine. "Olivia and her spreadsheets," said with a laugh that landed like a tiny push backward every time. But numbers made sense. People didn't. Then the 2008 housing crash hit. While everyone else panicked, I saw opportunity not because I was ruthless, but because I understood cycles. I understood undervaluation. I understood that homes, even broken ones, could become whole again with time and the right kind of care. I was 21 when I bought my first foreclosure in Portland, Maine, a tiny, peeling duplex with rotting floors and a roof that sighed every time the wind passed. I lived in the smaller unit and rented out the other. My parents called it a phase, assuming I'd eventually tire of renovation dust and spreadsheets. But I didn't. I lived cheap, absurdly cheap. Studio apartment, rusted Honda with a dented door. Meals that stretched for days, rice, beans, boiled eggs when I felt fancy. While Lauren posted photos sipping cocktails in Cabo with hashtags like number vacation mode, I was lying on my back in a dusty crawl space learning how to fix leaking pipes from YouTube videos. She showed off Chanel bags. I showed off new caulking techniques. She got upgrades. I got arm strength and the thrill of seeing cracked walls turn smooth beneath layers of paint. With every bonus check from my data analyst job, I bought another foreclosure. 1 became 2, 2 became 4. I learned to recognize the smell of mold like a language, could estimate repair costs with a single glance, could negotiate with contractors who underestimated me the moment I walked in. I was small, quiet, female, but I was the one writing the checks. Portfolio growth took discipline, and I had that in abundance because survival had taught it to me. 10 years passed. By 31, I owned 15 properties. By 33, 18. Duplexes, little single-family homes, a few condos near the university, an old Victorian I split into 3 rental units. My parents never noticed because they never asked. Lauren never asked because she was too busy posting self-care weekends in Miami. My net worth crept into the low millions, nothing flashy, but quietly powerful. My tenants ranged from students to single moms to retired veterans. I kept rental prices fair because I remembered what it felt like to be on the edge of belonging. And every decision I made, every renovation I oversaw, brought me further away from the girl who once felt small at Christmas dinner. But I never told my family. Not because I wanted to hide success, though in a way, I did, but because my father's discomfort with financially successful women was practically a family doctrine. A man should provide, he'd say. A woman should contribute, but not overshadow. The irony? My mother earned more than he did for most of their marriage. But acknowledging that would break the delicate hierarchy he worshipped. So I never shared anything more than a vague summary. I work in financial consulting. It was safe. Unthreatening. It kept my father from making the tight-lipped expression he always made when a woman stepped outside the boundaries he drew. They never asked further. They never imagined there could be more. Lauren once joked at Thanksgiving, Olivia could disappear for 6 months and none of us would know what she's doing. And everyone laughed, including Mom. I laughed too, but for a different reason, because it was true. They never asked. And I never volunteered. Silence became a comfortable shield. Meanwhile, Lauren's life glittered on the surface but was held together with credit cards. She and her husband Ethan moved from rental to rental houses in good school districts, luxury apartments with gyms they didn't use. She posted photos of brunches and spa days, but behind the scenes she was always between jobs, always barely affording the lifestyle she flaunted. They lived like people who expected a safety net to magically appear whenever they needed it because it always had. Because my parents always prioritized Lauren. Because Lauren believed that was her birthright. And me? I built my own net. Thread by thread, brick by brick. By the time Malik entered my life, a gentleman who admired my grit more than my compliance, I had become someone my family wouldn't recognize. Someone who owned properties across Portland, who had learned to negotiate loan terms sharper than any holiday dinner insult, who could spot predatory clauses faster than some lawyers. Someone who didn't need anyone's permission to succeed. But here was the twist. My family still saw me as the bookish, odd one. The girl who chose numbers over nail polish. The one who didn't fit into their world of curated perfection. They never considered that I might have built something bigger than any of them, not just wealth, but independence. And that is why, at Christmas, standing at the child's table by the trash, watching my husband endure questions masked as innocence and insults masked as jokes, I felt the entire weight of those years settle inside me. I had worked too hard, survived too much, and built too large a life to let people who never saw me decide what I was worth. They had no idea who I had become. But they were about to find out. It started with my parents' house, the one my father bragged about for decades, calling it the family home, as if the drywall itself carried our surname. After my mom had surgery and the medical bills stacked higher than the Christmas tree, they fell behind on their mortgage. At first, it was a missed payment. Then another. Then the letters came, the cold, official kinds with warnings written in bold. But instead of downsizing or seeking financial help, my parents did what proud people do. Blamed the economy, blamed the insurance, blamed everything except their refusal to change their lifestyle. When Dad called me and mentioned, in a tone too casual to be real, that banks can be dramatic and it's just a paperwork misunderstanding, I didn't believe a word. So I checked the public foreclosure notices online. And there it was, their address. A pre-foreclosure warning. The house where I grew up was 30 days away from auction. I remember sitting in my small home office, staring at the screen, and feeling something strange, not satisfaction, not anger, just clarity. My parents would never ask me for help. They couldn't. In their minds, I was still the quiet daughter with practical gifts, the one who fixed things but shouldn't make too much money, the one whose success they still believed needed parental guidance. They would never admit they needed me. So I made the decision for them. Using an LLC I had formed years earlier, Harbor Lane Holdings, I contacted the mortgage servicer and bought out their remaining debt. Every past due amount. Every penalty fee. Every dime of interest. On paper, the house now belonged to Harbor Lane Holdings. In reality, it belonged to me. My parents never knew. They still live there to this day, believing the bank corrected its mistake and their home was miraculously saved. They bragged about their good financial decisions that Christmas. They proudly lectured me about saving money while sipping eggnog in a house I now legally owned. I didn't correct them. There was no point. Some truths only matter when they need to matter. Then came Lauren and Ethan. My sister had always chased the lifestyle she believed she was destined for: suburban perfection, yoga studios, organic markets, the good school district. But she and Ethan had debt they never admitted to, and incomes they exaggerated to anyone who would listen. When they applied to rent a home in the upscale Eastwood Heights neighborhood, they were rejected twice. Too much debt. Too little income. Not enough savings. Not enough stability. Lauren called me, her voice trembling in frustration, not because she feared being denied a home, but because she was embarrassed. "We just need a temporary place," she whispered, "just something while we figure things out." I could hear the shame woven into her words. She wasn't used to struggling, and she didn't want anyone else to know. So, without telling her what I was doing, I bought a modest 3-bedroom home at the edge of Eastwood Heights, still zoned for the good school, but not so luxurious that it screamed new money. I purchased it under another property management company I often used, Seaside Residential. I offered Lauren and Ethan a rental rate nearly $900 below market value. I told them the landlord was sympathetic and liked stable tenants. They happily repeated that story to everyone they knew, bragging about their negotiating skills. Every time I visited their home, Lauren would point proudly at her kitchen island or her picture-perfect backyard and say, "See? Hard work pays off." She never wondered why the rent never increased. She never questioned why the landlord never visited. She never realized that the reason her son Noah got to attend the best public school in the county was because of me, because I had chosen to give her something she had never given me: stability. She didn't know. She didn't want to know. And then there was my mother's sister, Aunt Marianne. She had been through a messy divorce, losing her savings along the way. When she needed a smaller place, she found a miraculously affordable duplex near the riverfront. She rented the downstairs unit at a price so low other tenants would have fought over it. She told everyone it was because the landlord must have really liked her. That duplex was mine too. She never guessed. She didn't ask. My discount simply became part of her good luck narrative. But not everyone lived inside the illusion. My cousin James, my mother's niece, was the one person who knew the truth. He was a college junior when he asked me for help finding an apartment near the university. I showed him a small, renovated studio I owned. He asked if I was the landlord. I told him yes. And unlike the others, he didn't make it weird. He didn't treat it like charity. He didn't brag about knowing the owner. He just paid rent on time, cleaned the place well, and asked politely before having guests over. He adored Malik, always asking him about his research and cultural background with genuine interest, not the performative kind. James was the reminder that not all branches of a family tree rot the same way. But the real truth, the one no one at that Christmas table had the slightest clue about, was this. Nearly everyone in that house was living under a roof I paid for. Directly or indirectly, through LLCs or property managers, through discounted rent or quietly paid mortgages, my name, hidden behind legal layers, funded the stability of people who mocked my career path, belittled my education, and treated my husband like an inconvenience. Malik came into my life at a time when I had already learned how to stand alone, financially, emotionally, mentally. But he was the first person who ever made standing alone feel unnecessary. We met at a community financial literacy workshop. He was volunteering as a guest lecturer on cross-cultural communication, and I was teaching young adults how to budget. He was warm, steady, the kind of man whose presence made a room feel calmer. A first-generation immigrant from Ghana, now a university lecturer in sociology, he carried himself with the rare combination of humility and quiet authority. He volunteered at after-school programs, tutored kids who struggled, gave half his free time to causes that barely anyone noticed. The more I knew him, the more I understood what it meant to love somebody who was inherently decent. Naturally, I wanted my family to see him the way I saw him. Naive of me, maybe, but love makes hope feel reasonable. So the first time I brought Malik home for Thanksgiving, I dressed carefully, cooked a side dish my mother liked, and rehearsed answers to predictable questions. Malik walked in carrying a bottle of wine and a box of chocolates from a local Black-owned shop. He was polite, charming, effortlessly warm. But my mother's smile tightened the moment she saw him. Her first question wasn't, "How are you?" or "Nice to meet you." It was, "So, where are you really from?" There it was. The word really stretched like a tripwire across the doorway. Malik smiled, he always did, but I felt something inside me sink. He answered with patience, explaining where he grew up, where he studied, how he came to the U.S. My mother nodded politely, but I could see the glaze in her eyes, that subtle drift that said she had already placed him into one of her pre-labeled boxes. Then my dad stepped in larger than life, proud as ever, with a handshake too firm and a laugh too loud. "You must be very brave," he said, chuckling, "to marry into our intense family." It was meant to sound like a joke, but it felt more like a warning, a way of saying, "Do you really know who you're marrying?" Malik laughed softly, but the worry flickered across his face before he smoothed it over. Dinner didn't get much better. Lauren arrived late, her perfume wafting through the hallway before she even stepped inside. She gave Malik a once-over, that up-and-down scan some women use when deciding if someone is worth their attention. "So, how long have you been in the country?" she asked, as if Malik were a tourist rather than a faculty member at the state university. He answered kindly. She leaned back, sipping her wine, and added, "As long as he's not just here for the passport or the real estate." Her eyes slid to me, then away, her tone sugar-coated and poisonous. Ethan chuckled under his breath. My mother didn't scold Lauren. My father changed the subject. The air thickened with things unsaid. Malik sat upright, shoulders relaxed, answering every question with his characteristic grace. But under the table, I felt his leg brush mine, not the affectionate kind, but the "I feel it, but I won't make a scene" kind. By dessert, Malik had become a mirror reflecting everything my family refused to admit about themselves. He was educated, well-spoken, community-oriented qualities my parents claimed to admire in good people. But because he wasn't the right color of those qualities, they couldn't see him. They didn't want to. My parents tried to disguise their discomfort behind curiosity. Lauren disguised hers behind jokes. But I saw the pattern clearly, the microaggressions, the half-smiles, the dismissive comments dressed as humor, the intrusive questions that would never be asked of a white man. I had lived under that same microscope my entire life. Malik was just confirming what I had suspected for years: my family didn't know how to love people who didn't look like them. Still, at that time, I said nothing. Not because I agreed, not even close, but because I still believed in the idea of family. I believed that with enough time, enough exposure, enough patience, they would soften, they would evolve. They would learn to see Malik for who he truly was. I held on to that hope longer than I should have. Back then, I still thought change was possible. I still thought love could smooth out the jagged edges of old prejudice. I still thought loyalty meant staying quiet even when it hurt. But looking back, I realized something important. People rarely change when their world is comfortable. My family had built a world where they were always right, always centered, always unquestioned. They never needed to change. Not when everything was done for them. Not when their privilege was invisible to them. Not when the consequences of their words never reached their doorstep. Malik saw it long before I did. After that first visit, he held my hand in the car and said gently, "Olivia, I don't think your family dislikes me. I think they don't know how to see me." His voice was soft, but the sadness in it was unmistakable. I pressed my forehead to the window, staring at the streetlights rushing past, and whispered, "They'll get better." He didn't argue, but the silence between us felt heavy with truth. It took me years of watching them interrupt him mid-sentence, years of hearing compliments laced with ignorance, years of seeing him treated as an outsider in a home that was supposed to be mine too before I finally understood what Malik understood from day one. My family didn't reject Malik. They rejected anyone who wasn't their version of right. And because I loved him, their rejection of him slowly became a rejection of me. But back then, I still bit my tongue. I still hoped. I still believed that family loyalty meant enduring discomfort. And for a long time, I endured. Until Christmas night, when a 13-year-old boy echoed the same prejudice my parents had whispered my entire childhood. That night didn't come out of nowhere. It was the inevitable outcome of a pattern that had been growing, untouched, for decades. That night, I finally stopped enduring. Lauren was hosting Christmas that year, which already told me everything I needed to know. Whenever she hosted, the whole holiday felt like a performance: perfect decor, perfect table settings, perfect photos for Instagram. It was the kind of Christmas where everything sparkled except the way people treated each other. I had already told Malik I wasn't sure I wanted to go, especially after years of small cuts disguised as comments, questions, and jokes that only people who have lived inside prejudice recognize. But then my mother called. Her voice was warm in that curated way she used when she wanted something. "Christmas is just for immediate family this year," she said, as if every other year hadn't been the same. "We want you there, sweetheart. It's important." She paused, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Lauren really wants everyone together." That was the line that almost made me laugh. Lauren wanted everyone together only when it benefited her, when she needed an audience, a comparison point, or a storyline for her curated family image. Still, hearing my mother say, "We want you there," tugged at a part of me I hated to acknowledge, the part that still wanted to belong. I didn't answer right away. I told her I'd think about it, hung up, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the sink full of cooling cake pans. I had been planning to bake anyway, a simple gingerbread loaf with orange glaze. Baking calmed me. It made numbers make sense in a different way, measured, predictable, soothing. But that day, the smell of ginger and cinnamon made something ache in my chest instead of relaxing it. Malik walked in, drying his hands with a dish towel, and sat across from me. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't need to. He just waited. I sighed and said quietly, "Mom wants us to come. Christmas just for family." He tilted his head, the faintest smile on his lips. "And what do you want?" "I don't know anymore," I admitted. "Every time we go, it gets harder. I'm tired of pretending I don't notice the things they say." I swallowed, fingers tracing patterns on the table. "But it's still family. Part of me. I guess I keep hoping it won't always feel like this." The zero. Malik reached across the table and took my hand. "If it matters to you, we'll go," he said gently. "Just once more. Then we decide what the future looks like." Something in the way he said it, steady, loving, without pressure, made me breathe easier. He never forced me to choose between him and them. He simply refused to let me choose pain over peace. So we agreed. One more Christmas. One more chance. One last test. The morning of Christmas Eve, I baked the gingerbread loaf, letting it cool on the counter while Malik wrapped the non-alcoholic wine we were bringing. Lauren didn't like cheap-looking gifts, so I tied the bottle with a velvet ribbon even though the thought made me roll my eyes. I packed everything neatly, trying to ignore the small knot building in my stomach. In the car, the world outside was peaceful, snow still clinging to rooftops, wreaths hanging from street lamps, the kind of postcard Christmas my family loved to brag about. Malik drove while I held the cake container in my lap like it was something fragile, something symbolic. Maybe it was. As we turned onto the long, tree-lined street leading to Lauren's house, I stared out the window and felt the weight of years settling on me. The truth was impossible to ignore. Half the people sitting at that dinner tonight were living inside homes I paid for, homes I maintained, mortgages I saved, rents I discounted. They had no idea that their stability existed because of me, not because I wanted credit, but because I believed that families should support each other, even when the support wasn't reciprocated. I had poured years of money, labor, and love into people who had never once asked me how I was really doing, never wondered if their words hurt, never considered that their definition of our kind might not include me or the man I loved. In the quiet hum of the car, a thought surfaced, clear, sharp, and painful. If they can respect Malik tonight, if they can show him even a fraction of the kindness he deserves, maybe there's still something left to salvage. Maybe all the generosity, all the loyalty, all the forgiveness hadn't been wasted. Maybe this could be the Christmas where everything turned. I looked over at Malik. He smiled back, warm and hopeful. And I made a silent promise to myself. This would be the last time I hoped alone. If Christmas showed me they were willing to change, I'd stay. If not, well, even foundations can shift. And I was done building houses for people who didn't know how to treat the ones living inside them. Lauren's house glowed like a showroom the moment we pulled into the driveway, warm lights strung along the roofline, wreaths on every window, a towering Christmas tree visible through the front bay window. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon and expensive candles, and the entire first floor looked as if it had been staged by a professional decorator. A brand new marble kitchen island, a plush, cream-colored sofa, garlands draped perfectly along the banister, piles of coordinated presents arranged so neatly they could have been props. Malik smiled politely as we stepped inside, but my stomach tightened. I knew exactly why the house looked so perfect. I had bought it. The rent Lauren paid every month was barely half of what the neighborhood demanded. Every time she framed a photo in this house, every time she hosted a book club or Mom bragged about how successful Lauren was, it was because I had made it possible. Without my secret subsidy, Lauren and Ethan wouldn't have been able to afford even the down payment, much less the lifestyle they curated like a personal brand. Mom walked in from the kitchen, cheeks pink from the oven, her arms open wide for Lauren but not for me. "Sweetheart," she told my sister, "you've outdone yourself again. Look at this house. You're so good with finances. Everything looks so elegant, so put together." She gestured around as if Lauren had personally laid every tile, paid every contractor, negotiated every loan. Not one word about who made the house accessible to begin with. Not one acknowledgement that the only reason Lauren wasn't still living in a cramped townhouse was because I had stepped in years earlier. I smiled tightly. Malik squeezed my hand once, subtle reassurance. Trying to shift the mood, I lifted the cake container slightly. "Do you need help in the kitchen?" I brought the gingerbread loaf. Lauren turned, her hair perfectly curled, her smile painted on. "No need. Everything's already coordinated. Besides," she laughed lightly, "you'll just mess up the aesthetic. Just sit with Malik, okay?" She said it sweetly, but the dismissal was sharp enough to draw blood. I swallowed it down. Again. Malik, always gracious, said, "We're happy to help if you need anything," but Lauren was already ushering us away as if we were guests she barely knew. In the living room, Noah and 3 of his friends sprawled across the couch, phones in hand, the TV flashing quick-cut TikTok compilations. Malik and I had barely sat down when the boys started laughing at a video labeled "Immigrant Fails." A man with a thick accent mispronounced something in English. The boys roared with laughter. Noah nudged his friend. Looks like Malik's people. Miyaf clenched. Malik said nothing, his posture calm, his eyes soft. One of the boys swiped to another video, this time a clip mocking a man from West Africa being interviewed on the street. Noah turned toward Malik with the easy confidence of a child who has never been corrected. So, he asked loudly, "When did you come to our country?" Malik smiled gently. "I was born in Ghana but raised in the States from a young age." Noah's eyebrows shot up. "Did you grow up poor?" The room seemed to tilt. Malik opened his mouth, but I jumped in first. "Noah," I said evenly, "that's not an appropriate question." He shrugged, not embarrassed at all. "I'm just curious." I waited for Lauren to walk in. For my mother, my father, anyone. Parents love to brag about teaching their children manners, yet here, in real time, their own grandson was treating my husband like an exhibit at some cultural museum. But no one came. No one heard. Or worse, they heard and didn't care. Malik answered anyway, as gently as always. "I've lived many kinds of lives," he said. "Some humble, some fortunate. All of them taught me something important." Noah blinked, unimpressed by nuance. "So, you were poor." I gripped my glass so tightly the cold water inside sloshed. The boys laughed again. The sound scraped against my spine. Malik's eyes met mine for a brief moment, calm, patient, heartbreakingly kind. He didn't need to speak. I already knew what he was thinking. I knew because it was the same thing I was thinking. This is who they are. This is what they teach their children. This is the world they believe they own. Footsteps finally echoed from the hallway, and my mother stepped in holding a tray. She smiled at the boys. "Having fun, guys?" And didn't notice the shift in the air, or maybe she noticed and chose to ignore it. She didn't ask what they'd been talking about. She didn't question the laughter. She didn't see the way Malik sat with his hands folded politely, a man holding dignity like a shield. "Dinner in 10, she chirped. "Go wash up." The boys ran upstairs. Malik exhaled. Just once. Quiet. Controlled. I reached for his hand, but my fingers were still cold from gripping the glass too hard. For a moment, I wondered how many times he had endured this exact dynamic, smiling through ignorance, absorbing insults disguised as curiosity, being treated like something foreign in a country he'd given years of his life to. And that was only the beginning of the night. The call for dinner came with the practiced cheerfulness my mother used when she needed everyone to act like a perfect American Christmas card. "Dinner's ready. Everyone to the table." She rang a little silver bell she only brought out on holidays, as if polished metal could create harmony where none existed. We followed the others toward the dining room, the real dining room. The long mahogany table glowed under a chandelier, draped in a cream linen runner embroidered with gold thread. Plates of fine china were already set, each topped with neatly folded napkins and tiny sprigs of rosemary. Candlelight flickered against crystal wine glasses. It looked like a magazine spread, picture perfect, curated, gleaming. Seats around the big table filled quickly. My parents at either end, Lauren and Ethan on one side, a couple of my mom's cousins on the other. All white. All comfortably arranged as if they'd been rehearsing their positions for weeks. And then I noticed something odd. 2 name cards printed, not handwritten, rested on a cheap plastic folding table just outside the dining room, wedged in the narrow laundry area between a washing machine and a recycling bin. The table was set with paper plates, disposable cutlery, and 2 flimsy folding chairs that looked like they would collapse with one wrong shift of weight. No tablecloth, no centerpiece. Just a stack of napkins and a half-used bottle of disinfectant wipes pushed to the corner. Olivia and Malik. Our names. Placed neatly beside the trash. I blinked. I actually thought it was a mistake, maybe something temporary, maybe a joke in terrible taste. So I walked to the doorway and pointed. "Why are our names here? There's space at the big table. We can just squeeze in." Lauren turned with that bright hostess smile she used whenever she wanted to look benevolent while delivering cruelty. Oh, right. She tucked a curl behind her ear. We're keeping the main table intimate for the kids and, core family. It's a tradition now. She laughed softly. I knew you'd understand. The words hit my chest like cold air. Core family. The rest of us? Peripheral. Optional. Or, in Malik's case, an outsider whose presence had to be managed. I looked at the big table again. There was room. There was plenty of room. They had actually left 2 chairs unused, pushed back against the wall, just so they could tell us there wasn't space. Malik stood beside me, steady but quiet. It's okay, he whispered. We can sit here. It's just a meal. But it wasn't just a meal. It was a message. We moved toward the folding table, and as we pulled out the rickety chairs, Noah, already seated comfortably at the big table, looked over, smirking like he knew a secret. When he opened his mouth, the entire room shifted. Anyway, he said loudly, we don't sit with your kind. Silence lasted 1 second. Then laughter broke out. Not all the adults laughed the same way. Some let out awkward chuckles, others genuine snickers, but none of them stopped him. My father made a soft clicking sound with his tongue, a meaningless gesture. My mother pretended she didn't hear and reached for the mashed potatoes. Lauren shook her head with a performative sigh. He just means we have a tradition, she said, waving off the cruelty. Don't make it a big deal. A tradition. A tradition of exclusion. A tradition of ignorance. A tradition that had shaped my entire childhood. I didn't respond. I couldn't, not yet. I stared at Noah, at the table of adults behind him, at their practiced indifference. My grip tightened on the back of the plastic chair as if grounding myself against the urge to leave. Malik, ever gentle, placed a hand on my shoulder. We can just eat and go, he murmured. But as the words left his mouth, something inside me snapped, not loudly, not violently, but with a clean, almost peaceful clarity. The kind that comes after years of swallowing disrespect, years of forgiving things that weren't innocent, years of hoping for people who did not want to be better. I looked at the gleaming dining table, at the family who had always claimed to be morally upright, open-minded, and progressive. People who voted for diversity initiatives and donated to charities while raising children who repeated the same prejudices they claimed to oppose. People who had built their lives on houses I bought, paid for, and maintained, yet refused to give me, or my husband, a literal seat at their table. A cruel but honest thought slid into place. I have bought the roofs over their heads. But they will never let me sit under theirs. I let my eyes drift slowly across the room, the expensive chandelier, the curated decor, the perfect symmetry Lauren worked so hard to present. None of this was the result of her financial brilliance. None of it came from a budget she managed well. Every candlelit detail existed because of my quiet generosity. Every holiday in this house existed because of the discounts they never questioned. Every mortgage paid, every renovation completed, every stable home they occupied. All of it, every single piece, was mine. And still, they placed us by the trash. Something inside me settled. Not anger, something colder. Something still. The kind of clarity that doesn't leave room for negotiation. I sat at the folding table. Malik sat beside me. But my mind was already somewhere else, rewinding years of sacrifices, recalculating every silent contribution, rewriting what loyalty was supposed to mean. In that moment, amid laughter and clinking silverware and willful ignorance, one truth crystallized cleanly in my chest. I had been financing people who would never, not in this lifetime, give me or the man I loved even the smallest place of dignity. And this time, I wouldn't swallow it. This time, something would change. This time, there would be consequences. The snap had already happened. The room kept moving as if nothing had happened, forks scraping plates, fake laughter bubbling, the soft flicker of candles dancing over the polished mahogany table, but inside me, something had gone perfectly still. Not numb. not shocked. Still, like the moment a storm stops pretending it's harmless. I set down my paper napkin, pushed my flimsy chair back, and stood. Malik looked up at me, gently questioning with his eyes, but he didn't stop me. He knew this silence inside me. He had seen it forming for years. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. The movement drew a few glances, but no one took it seriously at first. They assumed I was being dramatic. Or overwhelmed. Or maybe about to walk out to cry and then return, like I always had, ready to swallow my pride for the sake of family. But I didn't walk out. I stayed right there next to the trash bin, under the dim laundry room light, and tapped the first number on my speed dial. "Hi, Alan," I said, my voice calm enough to make Malik straighten slightly. "I need to activate Clause 14, C of the Life Estate Agreement, effective immediately." The room froze. Forks hovered midair. Noah's smirk faded. Lauren blinked, confused. Only Malik understood instantly. Because he was the only one who knew what Clause 14C was. On the other end of the line, my lawyer responded swiftly. "Of course. I'll file the notice tonight. Just to confirm. The clause regarding maintenance of a non-discriminatory environment and respectful treatment of invited guests." I kept my eyes on my mother as I said, "Yes. That one." My mother stiffened. My father frowned. Lauren squinted like she was trying to understand a foreign language. I ended the call and dialed the second number. "Hi, Christine," I said. "Please raise the rent on Eastwood Heights, Unit B starting next month. Market rate, no discounts. Remove all preferred tenant status, and yes, notify them under the owner's directive." She paused. "Understood. Should I also remove the fee waivers and maintenance exceptions?" "Yes," I said, my gaze fixed on Lauren. "Everything. They get the standard package now." Lauren's complexion went 2 shades lighter. "Wait, what? What are you doing?" I didn't respond. I was already pressing the third number. "Hi, Dr. Patel," I said. "I need you to schedule an emergency trust meeting. Invite my grandmother. Yes, after Christmas, the earliest available date, and please ensure she has the revised portfolio report." "Of course," he replied calmly. "Is this regarding the Harper allocations?" "Yes," I said softly. "It's time." When I hung up, the silence was complete. Not a single clink of silverware. Not one fake laugh. Even the candles seemed to stop flickering. I turned back toward the dining room, stepping out of the laundry shadows and into the warm golden light. Every eye followed me as if I were someone entirely new, someone they were seeing for the first time. I stood there, calm, steady, almost frighteningly composed. And I spoke. "So," I began. "Since I've already interrupted dinner, we might as well clear a few things up." My father's voice cracked first. "What's going on, Olivia? I own this house." I let the words settle. "Technically, Harbor Lane Holdings owns it. But that's me. I've been your landlord for 3 years." Lauren's mouth dropped open. Ethan stiffened. Mom's hand flew to her chest. "And the duplex Aunt Marianne rents? Mine. The apartment James lives in? Mine. The house you—" I nodded at my parents. "Still live in because I bought the mortgage when you were 60 days from foreclosure? Also mine. In shell." My mother's eyes widened in horror. "What do you mean foreclosure? That was a bank error." I cut her off gently. "No, Mom. I bought your loan. Quietly, and I've been paying the rest ever since." She covered her mouth. My father stared at the tablecloth. Lauren looked personally betrayed, as if generosity toward her had been an insult. Then I continued because the truth was only half a wound unless fully exposed. "So here's what will happen next. Mom, Dad, starting next month, you'll pay a portion of your housing costs again. Or you can agree to the updated terms Grandma's trust will outline, which includes 0 tolerance for discriminatory behavior toward any guest of mine. If you refuse, the life estate can be legally restructured." My father stuttered. You wouldn't dare. You dared first, I said softly. You dared to let your grandson insult my husband in a house I pay for. Lauren shot up from her chair. What about us? You can't just raise our rent. This is family. Oh, Lauren, I said gently, family doesn't place family next to trash cans. She flushed. It was a seating choice. It was a message, I said. And I received it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't lash out. I simply delivered consequences precise, cold, and overdue. Your rent will increase by $900 to $1,000 a month, depending on the updated market analysis. No more family discounts. No more special treatment. Her jaw dropped so wide I wondered if she'd swallow her own pride right there. As for Aunt Marianne, I continued, she'll choose whether to pay market rate or move. I'll even write her a recommendation letter if she finds a new place. But the discount ends with tonight. Finally, I turned to Noah, the boy who had sparked the match. The heir to the prejudice my parents once planted. I knelt slightly so we were eye level. He didn't look so smug now. Tonight, I said quietly, you taught me exactly who my kind is. He swallowed hard. And because of that, I won't make the mistake of funding the wrong kind again. I stood, took Malik's hand, and looked at the room one last time, their shocked faces, the untouched turkey cooling on the table, the perfect decorations Lauren had spent weeks obsessing over. Enjoy the rest of Christmas, I said. We won't be staying. Then Malik and I walked out past the expensive candles, past the curated ornaments, past the house that belonged to me even if they didn't know how to belong to me. Outside, the cold air felt clean. Pure. Honest. Behind us, the house stayed silent, no laughter, no music, only the echo of a truth they could no longer ignore. And with every step we took toward the car, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not victory. Not spite. Something closer to liberation. The next morning, my phone started ringing before the sun even came up. First it was my mother, her voice already trembling before I picked up. Then Lauren. Then my father. Then Ethan. Then a string of numbers I didn't recognize, probably my parents using every phone in the house until I answered. Every voicemail sounded like a different stage of grief. Mom was crying. Dad was furious. Lauren was hysterical. Ethan tried to sound logical but cracked halfway through. You blindsided us. How could you do this to your own family? You ruined Christmas. You're overreacting, he's just a kid. You always think you're better than us. I tow. And under all those accusations, all that noise, I heard the one real wound beneath their words. We got comfortable with your generosity, and you took it away. Around noon, I finally answered one call, just one. It was my mother, sobbing so loudly the phone crackled. Olivia, sweetie, we didn't mean anything by it. Lauren is beside herself. Noah didn't know what he was saying. Your father can't sleep. We're family. You can't just take away our homes. Her desperation was thick, sticky, manipulative in that old, familiar way. But I didn't let it reach me this time. I took a breath and said calmly, you don't get to insult my husband and still live off my work. Then I hung up. The calls kept coming. By evening, my father left a voicemail in his lawyer voice, the tone he used when he wanted to intimidate people. You have no legal grounds for this. You can't threaten to revoke a life estate. You can't arbitrarily raise your sister's rent. If you push this, we'll take you to court. I saved the message and didn't respond. Instead, I sent him a text with 3 words. Talk to the trust. He didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. But he would. 2 days later, I walked into the Lambert and Chase Private Banking Center with Malik at my side. Snow fell softly outside, muffling the world in white, the kind of weather that usually made me nostalgic. But today, I felt nothing except a quiet sense of inevitability. When we reached the conference room, my grandmother, my mother's mother, was already there, sitting upright in her navy coat, hands folded neatly over her cane. She was 92, sharp as glass, and the only person in my family who had never treated Malik like an outsider. She had looked him in the eye the first day she met him and said, "Good. She needs someone thoughtful." Across from her sat Dr. Patel, the trust advisor. A thick binder lay open in front of him. "Shall we begin?" he asked. My grandmother nodded, then turned her head toward me, her eyes clear and unwavering. "I watched what happened on Christmas," she said. "I heard everything." He blinked. "You heard?" "I'm old, not useless," she said dryly. "And your mother leaves her FaceTime on more often than she realizes." A small, stunned laugh escaped me. Malik's eyebrows lifted. Grandma continued, "This family forgot who raised them. So I spent the last 48 hours rewriting my will." My breath caught. Dr. Patel slid a document toward me. "Your grandmother has named you co-manager of the Harper Trust, effective immediately." Co-manager. Not beneficiary. Not assistant. Co-manager. That meant control. It meant authority. It meant ownership not just of the properties I'd bought, but of assets I'd never even known existed. I flipped through the documents: stocks, bonds, an old family vacation home, antique collections, long-term investments that had been accumulating for decades. My grandmother had consolidated everything under the trust and quietly, strategically shifted voting power to me. My hands trembled slightly. "Grandma, why?" She leaned back in her chair. "Because you're the only one with a backbone. And the only one who hasn't asked me for a dime." I swallowed hard. "Lauren and your parents," she continued, "will still receive something. I'm not cruel. But they will no longer control the trust. They will no longer manipulate it. They will no longer drain it." I hadn't realized until that moment how long I'd carried the weight of being the overlooked one. Hearing her say those words felt like someone finally turning on the lights in a room I'd lived in my whole life. Grandma tapped her cane lightly on the floor. "Now, about the fund you mentioned on the phone." I straightened. "I'd like to establish a scholarship and housing fund for immigrants, nursing students, and working-class families who need access to stable housing. Call it the Your Kind Fund." Malik's breath hitched softly beside me. Grandma's lips twitched upward. "Clever. Poetic." Dr. Patel nodded. "We've structured it so that all increased rental income from properties leased to your parents, sister, and extended relatives will flow directly into the fund." I closed my eyes. So this was it. This was the beautiful part. Not revenge restructuring. Not punishment reallocation. Not spite justice. The very money my family had expected me to give them without question would now support the people they dismissed, mocked, or feared. Students like Marisol, the girl my mother quietly discouraged decades ago. Workers like the women my father called uneducated. Families like Malik's, who came to this country with hope and determination, not entitlement. When I opened my eyes, Grandma was watching me with a softness I had almost forgotten she possessed. "You did the right thing at Christmas," she said. "Sometimes the only way to teach people who refuse to learn is to let consequences do the talking." For the first time in days, I felt my chest loosen. We stayed another hour, finalizing details, signing forms, setting dates. When it was over, Grandma pressed her gloved hand over mine. "Use it well, Olivia. Use it kindly. Use it for people who deserve it." And just like that, the legacy my family had tried to bury me under became something I could finally breathe beneath. Walking out of the bank, Malik took my hand and whispered, "Your kind is going to change lives." Oh. And I realized he was right. What happened next, what would continue to happen every month, every year, wasn't just karma. It was transformation. Redirected generosity. Justice disguised as accounting. It was beautiful. 1 year passed, then nearly 2, and the shift in our family's landscape unfolded slowly, quietly at first, then undeniably. The repercussions of that Christmas dinner rippled through every branch of the Harper family like a delayed earthquake, each tremor revealing who stood on solid ground and who had been leaning on illusions for far too long. Some relatives moved out almost immediately. The moment the discounted rent disappeared, they packed their belongings into vans and drove off in silence, dignity bruised but pride intact. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't send holiday cards. They simply vanished from my tenant roster, like tenants who had never expected to pay what everyone else in the city paid. Their absence didn't bother me. It clarified everything. Others stayed grudgingly. My Aunt Marianne, for example, renewed her lease with a resigned sigh, avoiding eye contact when she signed the updated agreement. She had always been more tired than cruel, more lost than entitled. When she handed me her first full market rate check, she whispered, "Thank you for not kicking me out." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest she had ever come. I accepted the check and nodded. No theatrics, no vindication. Just boundaries and peace. My parents remained in their home thanks to the minimal life estate Grandma insisted on preserving. But the shift in power was impossible for them to ignore. They no longer controlled anything, not the trust, not the home, not the narrative they had clung to for so long. Our relationship settled into a polite, shallow rhythm, short calls about weather, health updates, the occasional reminder about a doctor's appointment. No intimacy. No emotional demands. No attempts to rewrite the past. The distance, surprisingly, felt like relief. Lauren reacted the worst, as everyone predicted. She became a one-woman parade of martyrdom on Facebook, posting long captions about family loyalty and how blood should come before money, all while cutting back on vacations, spa weekends, wine subscriptions, and the elaborate birthday parties she used to throw for Noah. She never admitted publicly or privately that her reduced lifestyle had anything to do with the rent she now paid in full each month. She simply painted herself as the victim of an ungrateful sister. Even then, she never apologized. Not once. Some people would rather drown than admit the water is rising. But far from the noise and the theatrics of my biological family, something far more beautiful took shape. The Your Kind Housing and Scholarship Fund blossomed faster than any of us anticipated. Within the first year, we had helped a young immigrant couple buy their very first home, a modest condo near the pier, perfect for raising the baby they were expecting. I visited during their move-in day. The husband cried when he signed the last form. The wife hugged me for so long I didn't know how to step back without breaking something sacred. We helped a young nursing student, barely 22, secure her first apartment. She sent Malik and me a handwritten note afterward that said, "My parents cleaned houses their whole lives. Now I can study to take care of them. Thank you for believing in girls like me." Oh. A refugee family from Eritrea, 4 people who had spent years bouncing between shelters, finally settled into a warm duplex with stable rent and neighbors who welcomed them with casseroles and blankets. Malik spent hours helping them move, speaking softly with the children, making them laugh. The fund grew with every rent check from family members who had once laughed at my husband. Their money now sheltered people they would have crossed the street to avoid. There was poetry in that, but I didn't need poetry. All I needed was progress. Once a year, the foundation hosted a small scholarship ceremony. At the second one, Malik stood at the podium handing certificates to students whose faces reflected every shade of humanity: brown, black, tan, olive, freckled. The exact kind of faces my mother once carefully avoided letting into her home. Malik's eyes shone as he looked at them, and when he stepped off the stage, he squeezed my hand so tightly I felt the weight of everything we had survived settling between us. "This," he whispered, "feels like justice." Christmas came again. But this time, our house was filled with warmth, not curated warmth, not Instagram warmth, but real warmth. We hosted a small dinner with friends, coworkers, a couple of scholarship recipients, and James, my cousin. The only one from my mother's side who had managed to grow into a decent human being without losing himself to entitlement. The house smelled like cinnamon and spiced cider. Malik played music from his childhood, and everyone laughed as we taught each other how to dance to unfamiliar rhythms. Someone brought homemade rolls. Someone brought a pie. The table was imperfect, mismatched, abundant. It felt like a home where love lived, not where appearance was performed. Halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Then one from my father. Then Lauren. "We miss you at Christmas." I stared at the screen for a moment, letting the words sit there without attaching themselves to me. Then I typed back. "Hope you're warm and safe." No explanation. No invitation. No guilt. Just a boundary wrapped in kindness. I put my phone face down on the counter and turned back toward the people around the table. People who chose me, respected me, saw me, not because they shared my blood, but because they shared my values. My new family. My real family. Malik watched me quietly from across the room. When our eyes met, he didn't need to say anything. I already knew the life we built together was worth everything we sacrificed to get here. In that moment, surrounded by mismatched plates and genuine laughter, I understood the lesson the universe had been whispering for years. You can't buy respect with discounts. But you can redirect your money toward people who actually see you as family. Now, let me ask you, the person listening to my story. If you were in my place, would you keep offering discounts to hold on to a family that hurts you, or would you let them pay the full price and choose your own kind of people instead?